on from here. Jim?
Thank you, John. I'll begin by saying thank you for inviting me to be the convener. This is quite an honor, and this is a topic, as President Bassett said, that is, well, it's essential to our future. You know, I wonder if we're not at one of, well, in this country, if we're not kind of that third big change of the Morrill Act, the land-grant universities, where we realize the need for massive education, and in post-World War II with the GI Bill, if we're not at another one of those moments because of the remarkable changes in technology that are driving our industrial changes. I had a fantastic conversation last night with one of the Heritage trustees about the changes in the ag industry brought, both from the development of new types of food to the operations of ag to the marketing of ag. And you know, we got down to someday a drone delivering the Honey Crisp to your door. And you know, the only thing missing there are all of the people that are currently employed in that supply chain. And so what are we going to do with our society or with those people who we have not prepared for this new society that we are moving into? I think there's a difference, John alluded to it in the public discourse, between the Morrill Act and the GI Bill, and those were, if you will, government interventions to fund and fuel radical changes in higher education. And I'm not hearing, maybe I'm just missing it in Ellensburg, but I'm not hearing the discussion in either in Olympia or in Washington, D.C., where those other ones took place, about how the government is going to help us transition. It's really more, it's less of a carrot and maybe more of a stick. Transition, or will take away, or will change the structure to have more micromanagement. So it really does behoove us to take this bull by the horn and to wrestle it in the direction that we think it should go. I also smiled when I saw the title. My background is communication, so I look very closely at words. John's got some whole other field that he deals with, so I won't blame him. But college degrees or creative abilities. Kind of maybe, it should be or, comma, I don't know. But no, but there is a sense, I mean, I think it's a good title because I think there is a sense that college degrees are somehow not providing those creative abilities, or not in all cases are college degrees necessarily giving industry what they want. I get in trouble on my campus fairly frequently by reminding the university that, at least from the view that I have, higher ed in the U.S. has really not changed that much since the Oxford model, the 14th century model. It's still place-based for the most part. Obviously, we're reaching out in distance technologies. We have hybrid classes, but we also still have chalkboards. And it's still basically a model where the students come to the professors, and the professors disseminate information and evaluate the students' absorption of that information, and 180 quarter credits later, thank you, sir or ma'am, and off we send them. So it is a good title because it does make us ask the question, are we responsive to the society that is, and particularly in the public sector, the public university sector, to the society that has commissioned us and that supports us. So it's a very, very good topic. I enlist all of your support. Now we're going to basically go in a format where we're going to have one this morning and one this afternoon, two nationally prominent voices on this subject. You are free to ask them any questions. John gave me permission that if you're not asking tough questions, I'm to be the provocateur, he said. I can be feisty and nasty and irreverent. I think he said irreverent. It might have been irrelevant. I'm not sure. But going back to the or, you know, it's or. So please do. Now, after some questions, we're going to, if time permits, we'll do some table talk. And then I'm going to ask some of the isolates here to join another table so that we have a good, thorough discussion, and the speakers and I and John and Kay will kind of roam around and see. And we'll give you some questions, some thought questions, but really these will be your discussions. You can do with them what you want. So let's get to it. Get back on a schedule. It's my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker. We all know this individual, Dr. Sean Gallagher, really a national recognized expert on strategy and innovation in higher education, with 15 years of experience as a consultant, a manager, and really advocate for change. Prior to his current posting at Northeastern, Sean worked for about 10 years at EduVentures and advising executives at hundreds of universities, educational companies, and investors in our sector. Since joining Northeastern in 2009, Sean has built a central strategy and business development function that is unique among U.S. universities. In fact, for those of us who are at colleges and universities, raise your hand if you have a Center for Innovation and Strategic Visioning. Exactly. Yeah, one guy over here, but he's lying again, so we don't. This is not something that higher ed has typically thought about. We've not thought of ourselves as part of a sector, as part of an enterprise, and how we are going to navigate it. We have thought of ourselves more as a place. So it's an interesting perspective that he has brought to really one of the universities that is a trendsetter in our sectors. He works across colleges and schools and academic domain to develop, catalyze, launch new initiatives, to enter new geographic markets, and to support growth through market analysis, partnership, and strategic planning. Dr. Gallagher is the Chief Strategy Officer for Northeastern University's Global Network. And as I mentioned, Northeast is one of the largest and most innovative private research universities in the U.S. and a global leader in experiential learning. He is founder and executive director of Northeastern University's Center for the Future of Higher Education and Talent Strategy, and executive professor of educational policy. He holds a Doctor of Education degree from Northeastern, an MBA from the New York Institute of Technology, and a BS in marketing from Northeastern. It's my pleasure, and please a warm round of welcome for Sean Gallagher.
Good morning. Thank you, Jim, for the kind introduction, and to President Bassett, Heritage University, Carnegie Corporation. It's really a pleasure to be here with you this morning and be in this beautiful valley. I've spent a lot of time in Seattle over the years, and also a little bit in Portland, and I hadn't made it over the mountains. It's just beautiful, and you get the sense of scale that you don't have in the East Coast Metroplex that I come from in Boston, going back and forth to DC and other places all the time. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today. So I'm going to talk about college degrees in the marketplace and the future of university credentials, which is the title of my recent book. Very excited and honored to be presenting on the same day as Matthew today. We both focused our research on employers, among other trends and issues, and that employer voice, bringing that into higher education, particularly four-year universities and colleges. That's really my kind of personal charge and passion and mission right now. It's bridging that gap between the two worlds and doing it in a way that's actually driven by evidence and data and analysis, rather than just speculation or finger pointing about, well, here's what we think employers want, here's what higher education is doing or not doing. So I hope that by covering some trends and sharing some research with you, we can hopefully have an exciting dialogue about the future, the possibilities, the challenges, etc. We've heard a lot about the death of higher education in the US recently, in the news media, from government leaders, etc. So I thought I would start out with a bit of a requiem for the degree and walk you through some of these headlines across major publications. The Economist recently asked, is college worth it? One of a number of articles of the same type, the same emphasis. We have books like College Disrupted and the End of College, The Death of Degrees Due to Alternative Credentialing. The Chronicle of Higher Education was posing that badges that you earned online might be a threat to traditional diplomas. If you look over to the business world, the Harvard Business Review ran an article a year or two ago called The Degree is Doomed. LinkedIn is going to eat the university. It's the end of the master's degree. degree. This is just a sampling. Some of these are fairly recent. We're going to blow up college and do it cheaper and smarter through nano degrees. We'll be talking about new forms of credentials. And might master's degrees be on their way out as enrollment starts to die and flatten. So those are the headlines. And there's a lot of complexity here. I'm not going to say that higher education is necessarily thriving in the United States. But there's a real disconnect between that, those assertions and what we see in the economy and in the workforce. So what you see here, this is the actual trend line going back to the Great Recession, plotted monthly of the unemployment rate in the United States, the headline level unemployment rate for individuals with a bachelor's degree or above. Currently stands at 2.4%, very, very low. So in the workforce today, and this changes of course regionally, and if you dig into some of the demographics, we have very low unemployment for individuals with a bachelor's degree and above, and we'll unpack that a little bit, but it's a strong job market. And recent job market growth, this is a graphic, an analysis that was done by Georgetown University's Excellence Center on Education and the Workforce, which really specializes in labor market economics. They show that 99% of the net job creation since the jobs recovery began in 2009 has gone to college graduates. So the blue line here, I'm going to test out the, there we go, the laser pointer. The blue line here is non-college level jobs, high school or less. You see downward trend, President Bassett was referring to that. And then you can see all this job creation, bachelor's and master's level in particular, in terms of the typically required credentials within these occupations and professional roles. And I like to point out one notable thing about this graphic is that master's degrees are running neck and neck with bachelor's degrees. And that's significant because bachelor's enrollment in the US higher ed system outnumbers master's enrollment by about 3 to 1. We have many more undergraduate students, bachelor's students, than we do master's students in our institutions. And yet the job market has really bifurcated if you look at the economic studies of this. And that's a real issue, that's a real social issue, economic issue, problems and issues of access, etc., where you have this growing demand for higher level skills, higher level jobs, higher level credentials, demand for jobs at that more foundational level, maybe it's an associate degree, a bachelor's degree, or something else, and then people falling behind if they do not have access to college education, or if they didn't complete a college degree and they have a great deal of debt or whatever else. So those are some of the issues we'll explore. When you look at it, I'm starting with the job market here, and then we'll move into higher ed and some of the trends that are happening. Burning Glass Technologies is a firm in Boston that we've worked closely with over the years. They've started to show up more in the national discourse. They have a system that allows you to basically document and catalog and parse all of the job listings, the openings that employers have created. And they can show you what level those jobs are at, what employers are hiring, etc. So when you look back across, I think it was 25 million openings in calendar year 2016. What you see, and at any given point in time, as we sit here today in Washington, I think there's about 6 million open jobs, and over the course of the year, you have 25 million in today's economy. If you look over those huge numbers of job openings, what you see is that 55%, 53%, can't quite read that from this distance, but I'm close, 53% prefer or require a bachelor's degree. The totals here are a little bit more than 100% because you can have, let's say, a master's degree preferred but a bachelor's degree required, so there's some overlap. You see graduate and professional degrees on the right at 16%. That's significant because only 11% of the US population has a graduate professional degree and only about 30% has a bachelor's degree. So the jobs are mostly at that bachelor's and above level. And a lot of the policy, and it's important, and of course earning an associate degree, I know there's a number of individuals and leaders from community colleges here today. Would love to have a discussion about that and some of the connectivity that we need between community colleges and other levels of education and four-year degrees. So much of the policy is focused on, well, if we just get people a vocational credential, or if we make community college more affordable, that will lead to a more competitive workforce, and many of these problems will be answered. And yet we have an economy that in the US and increasingly worldwide is demanding even higher levels of credential, while many pundits are focused on the idea that colleges and universities are failing and they're tremendously challenged and the degree is now worthless. So it's one of those examples of a polarized debate, right? The reality, I think, is somewhere in the middle with a lot of these issues. The status quo in higher ed will not survive. Likewise, we're not just going to have this stream of innovation that's going to provide magical solutions out of Silicon Valley. There's a lot of messy work to do in the middle. But the point here is that you can see through many data sources that degrees are very much in demand. And it does also cut across industries. To the retail example referenced earlier, Amazon has been hiring tens of thousands of workers each quarter, both in their fulfillment centers around the country, also in their Seattle headquarters and other places. In general, in that e-commerce, e-retail industry, 83% of those jobs prefer a college-level degree. While in the general retail sector, people that are working down the road at Target or Walmart or Nordstrom or wherever else, I believe it's only about 18%. So you have this switching that's happening where the jobs that are being created are much more oriented toward college-level education, and it's healthcare, it's finance, a lot of the tech jobs, right? Software development, analytics, coding, those high-growth areas. It's not only the technology firms, the Facebooks, the Oracles, et cetera, that are hiring people, it's hospitals, right? Healthcare, health informatics. It's finance firms that are looking to move into the digital era. So there's a lot going on, and it's a very interesting time. Another measure of the demand for college education and the value of it is the college wage premium. The thing about the college wage premium is that it's often bundled together as a college degree earns so much more than a high school diploma. And it wraps in there people that have a JD, and they might have an MD or something else. This is really interesting. If you have a subscription to it through your institution, I'd recommend it. David Auteur is one of the top job market economists in the world. He's at MIT. He published an article, I think 2 years ago, in the journal Science about the other 99% and skills in education. And what this graphic does, I pulled it right out of the article, so it really would be ideal to have it in one graphic, but this happens to break out male versus female wages. What you see here is it's the college wage premium, but here you have bachelor's degree, essentially flat since 2000, versus above a bachelor's degree. So to that point earlier, you've had a job market where the bachelor's degree is not getting you ahead in the way that it once did. If you look back through the decades, or particularly in the 80s, right, the value of a college degree, a bachelor's over a high school diploma was increasing. That's now flattened out a bit. And meanwhile, all of the gains have gone to people in terms of what folks are earning in these averages to people that have a master's degree. And again, that's an example of this increase in skills that are preferred or required by many employers. And so it's employers in part that are driving this trend. And there's a lot of interesting things we could explore in terms of, is this credential inflation, and what would the sociological theory say about all this? But rather than it just being credential inflation, what you often find when you talk to employers, and when you survey them, and when you measure their workforce in various ways, as was done here by Career Builder out of Chicago in a national survey last year, you find that about a third of employers are increasing their educational preferences or requirements over the last year. And those that are doing so, for example, hiring people with a bachelor's for a role that previously only sought an associate degree, a master's degree where previously they thought about that as a bachelor's level role. They're finding higher quality work results, greater productivity, better communication, higher levels of innovation. So one of the best measures we have is that premium. If master's degrees were not valuable, if bachelor's degrees were not preferable to just a high school level education, an employer who's motivated by profit, and often you have public companies and you have government agencies that need to be accountable, they would not be able to pay more. They would not pay a premium economically for individuals with higher levels of education. And yet they are, because the world of work is increasingly seeking people that have greater levels of skill. And I think Matthew will probably address elements of the skills gap and various skills that are valued by employers and why. So it's really important to think about. This is not to say that we can, everyone needs a degree and it's going to have the perfect mix of problem solving and critical thinking and creativity and technical skills. There's a lot to work through there, but this is in contrast to some of the debate about the value of college today. If we think about what are the occupations that are going to grow in the future in the Bureau of Labor Statistics types of forecasts through 2024, similarly what you see is that roles that require or prefer a bachelor's degree or graduate degree are growing the fastest. So from now to 2024, this is not an annual rate, but a total increase in terms of the number of jobs, things like cooks and landscapers, et cetera, those high school level jobs, only 4 to 7% growth. Undergraduate types of occupations and roles, financial advisors, engineers, accountants, nurses, 8% growth. And jobs that prefer a required advanced degree, 12%. Statisticians made the list of the fastest growing jobs in terms of the forecast last year. I think for the first time in a while, due to the growth of analytics and big data and the tremendous demand for people that can work with and interpret and analyze data. Physical therapists, nurse practitioners, PAs, etc., the whole healthcare field, which is well laddered and tends to move up and require advanced degrees. I didn't realize till recently that for physical therapists, the entry-level credential required by licensure and accreditation was a bachelor's degree, I think, until 1986. And in 1996, it became a master's. It went to a master's perhaps in 86, and then went to a doctoral degree, and now we're sort of used to in our economy and healthcare system that physical therapists have doctorates. But if you go back 20, 30 years, and you look at PAs and nurse practitioners and healthcare reform, who can prescribe medication, and all of this, a lot of it is tied to educational credentials and qualifications. Credentials, which is a key term, it's been a major policy focus and a major funding focus. And I trace it partly back to the Spellings Commission in 2005 or 2006. I think it was 2006 when they issued their final report. And on the very first page, they talked about the credentials that were going to be required by the job market that higher ed needed to reform or innovate to produce over the next decade. And then you had right here in Washington, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right? As they were thinking about their higher ed work in that same time frame, around the time the recession began. Same time frame as well, the Lumina Foundation, these large, influential, thoughtful foundations were charting a course, and they said, well, let's elevate educational attainment in the United States. Let's set high goals, let's have more of our population with a college degree, and we'll strive toward that from a policy perspective. In the 2010 State of the Union, President Obama called for that and set a national goal. And then this was also worked through with the National Governors Association. That's something called the, I think it was the Complete to Compete initiative. And it became an aspect of state policy, et cetera, that we still have today. Although there's some challenges to the idea of what people often refer to as college for all. It has some issues, but it's a noble goal. So everyone's been talking about credentials, and then you see the technology startup environment and investors in education companies, et cetera. Employers, they too are interested in, well, what's the credential? Does it have to be a bachelor's degree? Can we get people certificates or some other package of learning, some other way that we can assess their capability? And might that have value in the job market? Major focus. As a result of policy shifts and investments and just the way the economy is going and where people are investing their own dollars and time, students and families, we have had rising educational attainment rates over recent years in the US. They're not rising anywhere near the rate that many individuals and groups have set out to be the goal, to remain competitive and to have an optimized economy, but certainly we can strive toward those goals. What you see here is that the percentage of individuals, I think this is over 25 in the workforce, that have some college, no degree, has dropped over the last 5-6 years. Bachelor's degrees increased, graduate and professional degrees have had a particular increase. And associate degrees, we'll dig into that a little bit more, have increased as well, but they've been a little bit more flat. You've had declining enrollment in many community colleges, and also, frankly, it's a much smaller sector, but for-profit universities, many of which have closed or gone under in recent years, have focused on the allied health fields and associate degrees and shorter-term credentials. So educational attainment is rising, and you've heard me speak to master's and graduate degrees a couple times already. If we zoom in there for a moment, here's what you see in terms of master's degrees conferred annually in the United States out of the IPEDS data from the National Center for Education Statistics. So this was already a trend. This is where I focused my doctoral work. This was already a trend people were writing about in the 90s and in the 2000s, was the growth and the boom in professional master's degrees. Most master's degrees awarded in the US are in the fields of business, education, engineering, etc. So the vast majority of them are what you might call professional. And very often they're part-time more than they are full-time. So the notion of a master's being an MA in literature or going to grad school full-time is very much a dated notion relative to what the master's degree market, if you will, looks like today. So people were looking at this in the 90s and 2000s as you had this increase here. And then around that 2001 recession, also some demographic shifts. So the baby boom echo, or the millennials, peaked. They were the largest graduating high school class ever in 2007, I think it was. Bigger than the baby boom generation, something like 3.4 million. And so those individuals that completed high school, that completed college, and more often they're now enrolling in master's programs. Professionals who are 44, 45 years old are finding that they might want a master's degree. You see this little, and as we talked about earlier, it's demanded by employers. I can't find that. There it is. We had this swelling, this pulling forward of demand with enrollment. Who here, if we just do a show of hands, maybe we should have done this earlier, who represents a higher ed institution? Okay, so the vast majority of the room. And then raise your hands again if you were at your institution or another institution and you saw a massive increase in enrollment in 2009, 2010 at your institution. Ooh, fewer hands. Well, the national average, maybe some of it's sort of regional or by level, there was tremendous growth, particularly in the master's degree segment, 10, 15%. And I remember doing surveys at the time of individuals who, if they hadn't completed their bachelor's, they were now going back to school, or maybe they were going to grad school to wait out a poor economy. So things sort of returned to normal, but you see this very significant growth trend since 2000. And as I just referenced, you don't normally see jumps in data like this if you're familiar with some of these data sets. This is out of the census, the American Community Survey. Just in the last year that they reported this data, you had a full percentage point jump. This is every 25 to 29-year-old in the United States. What percentage of them by age 29 has earned a master's degree or higher? And it had a 1% jump just in 1 year, a continuation of a trend that had already started. So I find that really interesting because if you look back just 15, 20 years, this has actually doubled, right? If our notion is 4 or 5% of people by age 30 will earn a master's, today it's now doubled. And so people are pursuing higher levels of education. Meanwhile, despite the policy focus and despite their value in the job market, there's a lot of talk about a credential that has value in the job market and alternatives to a degree, right? Sub-baccalaureate credentials, vocational diplomas, certificates, etc. This is out of the IPEDS data as well. You've had a peaking, a leveling off, and a decline. And so it's really a story of segments, both by level, very different trends in higher ed by level and by discipline, and also by institution type, which is what I would highlight next. This might be a little hard to read just because it's pulled from a recent report. This is the National Student Clearinghouse. Their data is a little bit different, sometimes a little bit less reliable than the IPEDS data, but it's also in a way more nuanced. All sectors of higher ed in the US are on the left, so you've seen enrollments have declined. Four-year publics have grown a little bit, and for a number of years, and still today among urban universities and certain segments of private four-year schools, they've done pretty well, and then this significant drop in for-profit college and university enrollment, and also in two-year public community college enrollment. So a very different story, and particularly, I mean, at a convening like this, I think we all understand this, but we talk about higher education writ large. How are we going to fix higher ed, right? And really it is this marketplace of 4,000 plus accredited institutions just in the US, 25 million students or so in Title IV eligible programs, et cetera, and you have very different trends in very different segments, and so we have to be nuanced about what it is that we're looking at. I try not to use the word disruptive. It's such a buzzword too often, but online education really has been a disruptive force. And there's some interesting statistics today. A lot of the innovation that I'll speak to in a moment revolves around online education or hybrid learning being integrated into our traditional models. We've had this maturing of the online education market. This graphic here is actually what we did at Northeastern University back in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, where we beamed a signal a half a mile away to the top of the Prudential building in Boston, and then by line of sight microwave transmission, broadcast that out to our 3 or 4 branch campuses. and they would get the lectures and people could call up. I think you see the phone in there, and they could ask questions at the lecture in Boston. And that was what distance learning looked like. And that was fairly successful, but it was more broadcast. 1994, we had the commercially available World Wide Web. This is Mark Andreessen, the creator of Mosaic and then Netscape. And then the dot-com bubble, right? Does anyone remember some of the startup universities and the idea of the star professor who was going to be a nomad and could make millions of dollars by lecturing online, and they wouldn't need to be affiliated with an institution? We had the dot-com bubble and collapse, but much like the dot-com bubble and collapse in terms of telecom, right? The fiber and the groundwork was laid, right? The foundation was built, some technologies and some new philosophies were started up, if you will, and then in the years ahead, that was leveraged, and we had things like the online degree market develop in the United States. Online MBAs became much more popular in the mid-2000s. 2012 was a real inflection point where we had the year of the MOOC. This is the New York Times headline. And higher education was going to be refashioned and cannibalized by massively open online courses. And as I'll get into, there are some interesting innovations when we look at MOOCs, but certainly it has had almost zero impact on the higher education business model, at least as of today. And now we're in a much more mobile environment, right? A lot of our students at Northeastern, we have, I think around 10,000 online-only students, in addition to the students that are hybrid. You know, they're accessing things on their mobile devices, their iPads, etc. So the idea behind the graphic here is that we're maybe in the teenage years of online learning. It's still pretty early. It's matured, but it's still very early. There's a lot of growth ahead. Here are some of the statistics today. 30% of all students in US higher education are taking at least one online course, a fully online course, where they do not do that course on campus. At the graduate level, I referenced graduate degrees earlier. If you think of everything from the people enrolled in law degrees, although they're not online, people that are studying to get an advanced nursing degree or a degree in English and everything in between, 33%, 1/3 of all of that is today done through hybrid or online learning in terms of graduate education in the United States. The online market's growing at a 4 or 5% rate compared to the overall decline and flattening that we've seen. And 82% of the market share in online education today is held by nonprofit universities. Very different than years prior. I think for-profits peaked around 60% or so in 2000, and then 45, 50%. You've had the Southern New Hampshires, Liberties, everyone is involved in, not everyone, but many institutions, and increasingly top-ranked institutions. USC, Boston University, Northeastern, University of Chicago, University of Washington, Stanford, etc., with online degree options. And so what you get is this evolving credentialing landscape. This is a graphic out of my book, and I'll take a moment to explain it. Higher education is unbundling its credentials to respond to this job market that demands shorter form learning, more specialized learning, sometimes more technical. And then you have these upstarts out of industry and non-institutional providers. So over here you have your traditional educational institutions. They're trying to get more oriented toward market generally, right? Embed job skills and have stronger outcomes, etc. And then you have professional certifications, which have existed for years, right? New things like badges, nano degrees, these certificates that you can earn based on MOOCs. Those types of providers and those credentials are trying to partner with higher ed to get basically accreditation and recognition and brand. And then meanwhile, higher ed institutions are offering more certificate programs. We've long had certificates of completion in executive ed. MIT, and it's been extended to edX and all their partners, has this thing called the MicroMasters, where we're now seeing the birth of short forms of educational credentials. And that circle there is the zone of convergence, where there is now substitution in an economic sense, competition, overlap between what's offered by traditional higher education institutions with accreditation and financial aid and non-institutional upstarts and providers out of Silicon Valley and other places. And that's where I think it's really important to study that intersection. Certificates, though, there's been growth in certificates in the US. I think it's more like a 3, 4, 5% annual growth compared to sometimes you pick up a higher ed article and it gives you the impression that certificate enrollments are growing 25% nationally and degrees are flat or in decline. There problematic sometimes among employers because you can get a certificate for so many different things. Even at an individual institution sometimes across colleges or departments, we'll have a non-credit certificate, a for-credit certificate. You can get a certificate for doing an executive ed program. You can get a certificate that might have involved 6 courses or 4 courses and an assessment and it took you a year. Well, another one might have been a few weeks. And so as a signal on a resume, employers can't always define how deep or broad is that learning because the word certificate doesn't have a crisp definition, even within states and within institutions. And when I've interviewed employers and asked them, well, what do you think of certificates, and are you hiring more people with certificates, etc., they often conflate it with certification, and they start talking about PMI certification or supply chain certification, Microsoft or Cisco certification, which is actually a different thing based on an assessment, not necessarily a course. They're related, but the point here with a lot of this is, high level of a point as it is the semantics are really important, the semantics and the standards. A lot of the value that higher ed has in the workforce and in the economy in the US and worldwide is due to the fact that generally, although there's a lot of problems and issues, we understand what a bachelor's degree is supposed to represent. Yet, of course, it differs by institution and by major and by specialization. Our institutions had to come together through accrediting bodies and other groups and other consortia. I think the AAU was created due to this reason, regional accreditation was born due to this reason, to have standardization and some comparability. So we don't know if there's a government solution perhaps, or voluntary bodies of institutions, or just seeing how things play out in the marketplace. But for these new types of credentials to thrive and grow, we need some more comparability, and part of what's happening and is going to happen is that the availability and the transparency of all the data and the fact that you can sort of digitally show an employer or another institution what a student learned, what competencies that they have, etc. That's going to lead to this world of kind of integration and better comparability. A lot of hype about badges, not a lot of evidence that employers value them or that individuals are enrolling in more badging programs, although there are some very interesting things like IBM is offering their own badges and they're recruiting talent out of their supplier ecosystem by offering badges. So you see that is something employers are doing sometimes more than educational institutions. And then I've referenced the micro-credentials, and if you look closely here, you can see a trademark symbol next to each one, because these are actually trademarked terms. Udacity offers the nano degree, and we talk about nano degrees, but a lot of these constructs are based on the non-institutional providers and not higher ed institutions. edX has trademarked the MicroMasters, and I've heard they hope that they can kind of set the standard, working with a handful of institutions, and then either license that standard or open it up to the world, and it will be something that's more uniform across institutions. So when you hear about micro-credentials, really think about, well, what are these terminologies? How long or deep are they? What do they represent, and who offers them? And you'll see it's a very early, very messy environment where there's a lot of innovation ahead, and a lot of growth ahead. In the research for my book, I dig into, well, what are universities doing? Colleges and universities who are offering new forms of credentials. What do those look like? What are the themes and the trends with those credentials, and what are they called? Because you do see examples, it's a smaller set of examples, it's a smaller sample of colleges and universities stepping into new forms of credentialing. You have boot camp providers like Lynn University and University of New Haven who have partnered with General Assembly and Galvanize, respectively, IT coding boot camp providers. Often those boot camps are talked about as a new form of credentialing, but what credential do you get from a boot camp? You really don't right now. They don't offer a recognized credential. They give you an experience. It certainly does look like they're generally doing a good job educating. They're in effect schools, although in many states they're unlicensed. But you're not getting a credential. So many of them are partnering with colleges and universities. And in fact, the US Department of Ed last year, over the last 2 years, launched the Equip Experimental Sites program, which is very early and we're excited to be a participant in, where they've partnered up these non-institutional providers with higher ed institutions as an experiment to see, can we extend Title IV financial aid, which is probably somewhat of a fixed pie, to these new types of providers. And you can envision a world where if that happens, and perhaps you could also say politically that's more likely to happen in the current administration, where if accreditation changes, as Jim and others were talking about, if accreditation changes, then we're going to have this world where institutions are competing head-to-head with the new non-institutional providers. At Northeastern, we've developed something called the iCert, which is an interdisciplinary certificate that's tied to job competencies. Harvard Business School has what they call the Credential of Readiness. You have Johns Hopkins and other institutions that are offering new forms of online certificate through MOOCs. And the area I think is most interesting, and I'll speak to a little bit more briefly in a moment, is these programs that are sort of halfway between a free MOOC course and a traditional MBA or master's or something else. So the University of Illinois iMBA with Coursera, the Georgia Tech Master of Science in Computer Science, which has scaled pretty well and gotten a lot of attention. Those are new credential offerings. You still get actually the same credential. You still earn a master's degree from an accredited higher ed institution. But it's at a very different price point. It's with very different support and involvement of instructors. It's in a very different platform. Things like College for America out of Southern New Hampshire University, competency-based education, very promising, not a panacea, but a very promising direction. You still get an associate or bachelor's degree in the end. It is the same credential, but we have a new way to earn a credential. It is through a competency-based mode. It is through an online or hybrid mode. So much of the innovation over the last few years and over the last decade, and I think the innovation we'll see, is not necessarily in a new credential, but it's in a new way to earn an existing credential that we've had for a long time in higher ed. So the trends in credentials that are being offered by universities are from theoretical to more practical and experiential. One of the hallmarks of almost all of these examples, if I go back, and many others, especially the online certificates from some of these firms partnering with universities, is that they have a capstone, they have an experience, they have a project. And so it's not only a demonstration that you've completed a program and assessment, you also have a work product and something that shows what you can do. And so that's a major trend with these credentials and in higher ed. Not to say that we don't need, obviously we do need theoretical learning, but the trend is toward professional and practical. From traditional face-to-face to online, from monolithic to unbundled in short form. You take those same courses, you take that same faculty expertise, you take those learning outcomes, and once they're in an online platform, you can begin to unbundle and reassemble them and make them shorter, maybe charge a different price point. And this one's really interesting for faculty and others, from instructor-led to self-paced, right? Particularly through MOOCs. I mean, there have been experiments where students did not know that they were working with AI as a teaching assistant. I think that one was out of Georgia Tech. They went through the whole course, and I think they used IBM's Watson, and they called the TA Jill Watson. And this professor ran a controlled experiment, and the students did not know that they were actually getting supported by artificial intelligence. The role of the instructor is fundamentally changing. Very critical in some of these models to design the course, but not as much to deliver the course. When you have thousands of students, or even if you have 20. So that role is shifting and may be augmented or replaced by technology in some form. And similarly, from curriculum that's static to much more adaptive. There's been some hype around adaptive learning. It's still very early, but the idea that when curriculum and courses are online, you have personalized learning and people can kind of choose a little bit of their path and they can get the right materials and the right assessments at the right time, etc. So these are the general trends. And as I teed up a moment ago, I think this is really challenging some of the most enduring constructs we have in higher ed. Still very early, but what is credit? What is seat time? What is the credit hour? What is the role of an instructor? And who delivers the instructor? And who assesses it? Do we decouple assessment and credentialing from information dissemination and delivery? Right? These are kind of the multiple roles of universities and of faculty. This graphic here is right off of Udacity's website when I spoke to that spectrum and these new credentials and programs that are kind of in the middle between a MOOC, which is often free and self-paced, and frankly, often they're getting better, not very high quality, and more the traditional model. It's almost like Toyota and Lexus and Scion or Gap, Old Navy, Banana Republic. You have these different versions of the product at different price points that are happening. And Udacity calls out right here in their example, what varies is the support, the admissions, the pacing, the assessment, the tuition, right? One's free, one's the premium offering. And then similarly, Capella University, the online for-profit, they're actually still doing pretty well. in their recent investor presentation. The same kind of table, where they're saying, look, we're going to vary the tuition rate, we're going to vary the pacing, the involvement of instructors, the support that the student gets, and maybe we can offer something that's fundamentally pretty similar, or does the same job for the customer, Clayton Christensen would say, in the end, and gets them a credential, but it's through a different mode, and it's through an entirely different business model. So I think that's going to be very, very interesting to watch. So in conclusion, so we can get to some Q&A and dialogue, I think I'm doing okay on time. Here's what I would sum up as the critical themes when we think about how the economy is evolving, how higher education innovation is working, and what the opportunities and issues ahead are. The first key takeaway is just this lifelong learning economy that we're in. We're in an economy that values lifelong learning, values advanced credentialing. So it's not enough to only, as much as we do have to do it, talk about sort of foundational and basic credentials, or just the idea that people are going to, quote unquote, go to college or complete college, and then that's it, right? A lot of continuing education and a lot of attainment over a lifetime to thrive in this economy. And of course, huge socioeconomic issues associated with how do we do that in a way that provides access to the right populations and is affordable, etc. To my graphic, the blurring boundaries. We have non-institutional providers who are not yet eating the lunch of traditional accredited colleges and universities, but in some domains like continuing education, online learning, IT training, it's starting to happen. I think we'll see more partnership between institutions and these providers than we will a whole marketplace of upstarts kind of rise up. If you tally up all the revenue generated by those startup providers, it's about 250 million. And the revenue generated by accredited colleges and universities in the US is about $550, $600 billion. So right now, despite the articles and despite a few of these firms are valued at $1 billion. They don't have much revenue, but they're considered unicorns in the investing world. They're valued at $1 billion, but they're something like 0.25% of all the spend on higher ed and training and professional development in the US, but we have to watch that. Traditional notions of brand and prestige and scale and selectivity. Some of that is kind of falling away when you think about MIT and Stanford and others, or even Purdue recently, right? They're kind of opening up access. And if you look, for instance, with master's degrees, a little different than undergraduate education in the US News rankings, the top awarders by volume of master's degrees in the United States, and this has been the case for years, among private institutions include Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, Stanford, New York University, Northeastern, BU, Georgetown, right? Institutions that have, we think of them as selective, and we think of them as maybe being prestigious in some cases. That is now changing in this online environment, and it's changing in the world of professional education. Major issues related to pricing and ROI. I think ROI is a huge focus among employers and certainly students and parents, and the push and the movement is certainly toward more affordable, lower priced credentials and programs. We're starting to see those experiments. Higher ed institutions need to carefully, I think much more carefully in some cases, think about what's their core competency, what will they outsource or partner for, and who will they partner with, versus how much ownership do they retain over the instruction and the actual student learning, and what businesses, if you will, should they be in or not be in, versus kind of flipping a switch and signing a contract. And a lot of these firms do good work, but saying, you know, I don't think we can really change how our operation is administered or what the incentives are or how our faculty could approach this. So we're going to hire a company on the side that's going to build a new model, and you know they can solve the problem. So a lot of strategy issues there for institutions. Governance at colleges and universities, and new program development processes. All on agrarian calendars still for the most part. It takes us a year and a half to develop a new degree program, maybe 3 years in some cases, right? You get college approvals, eventually through provost offices and deans and presidents and outside state agencies and accreditors. But the job market is changing very quickly in many of these domains. If you tie all this to where is the growth, it's particularly in the STEM sorts of fields. And those are moving at a rapid pace in terms of programming languages, healthcare standards, global dynamics. So if we take a year or two to develop a new degree or refresh a new degree, that's not going to be timely or current enough to really deliver what's needed for the student and for the employer in this market. I think we're at a formative moment. This was referenced earlier in terms of quality assurance. In this age of data and transparency, And how do we assure quality? How do we accredit institutions? There may be a role for employers in this. That's some of the discussion in the current dialogue about the Reauthorization of the Higher Education Act in DC. Is, do employers emerge as some sort of third-party arbiter of data, or a firm like LinkedIn that has millions of data points, billions on people's career paths, where they went to school, if they've been promoted or not. In other cases, firms that know what people earn. And if they could sort of flip that around in this age of Yelp and Rate My Professor and college rankings, etc., we have more data available, and that could flip on its head some of our traditional notions about brand and transparency. And as I referenced earlier, standards, and certainly it's an uncertain time nationally in terms of regulation and the role of government and policy, but that's really central in all this too. You have an ecosystem that is changing, that is dynamic, and it means a lot of exciting work ahead for all of us. So with that, I think we have time for some questions and dialogue.
I started typing some of these out just so I can hold on to it. How would you recommend to bridge the gap between higher education, who are more traditionally based, to consider adapting some of the credential landscaping methodology you have presented?
So how can traditional higher education move toward these new forms of credentials and access kind of that market, meet that need? I think through experimentation. One of my arguments is that when you look over history, I think, I guess I'm biased, right, working at a university, but I think the history and the evidence shows that colleges and universities are in the driver's seat. They hold a lot of the kind of power and value in all this, and historically, they created new approaches, new forms of credentials, and then employers caught up, and regulation eventually catches up. So whether it's at a college level, or a program level, or whatever level, you know, as a leader in higher ed that one can control, or if you're a policymaker at a state level or a system level, engaging in these experiments where you're offering or developing something new, seeing if it has uptake, perhaps partnering with a technology firm, working directly with an employer in many cases. There are ways that we can just, on our own, kind of create these new constructs, see what succeeds, and then if it does, you know, scale out. That's how online education, online degrees really began and took off, and eventually the regulatory environment caught up to it. It's not always easy work, but I think it's fully within the control of faculty, deans, presidents, chancellors, system leaders, governors, to make some of this innovation happen by just tweaking in some cases, and in other cases entirely rebuilding the modes that we use or the assumptions that we have with credentials. So I hope that answered the question.
Definitely.
Yeah, thanks. Yes?
So in this seemingly sounding like the age of education going to Spirit Airlines model.
Oh, I'll have to look into that one more. I don't know Spirit as well, but yeah, it could be a good analogy.
You'll find out. I guess I'm wondering, and this is a very, I think, difficult question to answer, but I'm wondering if there are any studies on the effects are in terms of the loss of some of the hands-on experiential qualities that are more immersive. In other words, sort of the intangibles that are lost from that immersive experience on the impact of the graduates, not only learning, but also capabilities in the field once they get out into the marketplace.
So when you say immersive, is that a reference to traditional modes of education, the socialization and the experience and transformation that tends to happen versus if you do it all on a laptop,
right? You
know, from Brussels or Dallas.
I mean, are there any studies on any of those things, and how are those measured?
Yeah, I think generally there aren't enough studies. There is a lot of literature. It's continuing to grow in online education, and what's sometimes called the no significant difference phenomenon, and new studies that are happening that show in the end the outcomes and the performance is similar. And in some cases with hybrid instruction, people have argued that it's better in terms of the outcomes compared to the traditional approach. In terms of experience and practicality and kind of tangibility, I think that's definitely more of the trend. That's maybe what's hardest. So Northeastern is known for its experiential learning, its cooperative education model. We're real champions of this, but it's very hard to bring that into most higher ed institutional formats, right? How do you engage it with the workplace or have a paid kind of experience that's woven into it, even an internship, a project. That can be complicated, but that's absolutely a trend, not just in the US and worldwide, is that employers, everyone who's surveyed or measured or tracked enrollment or however you do it, employers, students, parents, and others value experience. And there's a fine line between education and experience. That's something that has to be studied too. So sometimes degrees are a proxy for ability. And frankly, that's part of why, in addition to the skills and competencies that are supposed to be there directly from earning a degree in X or Y, that is why employers value degrees, as it shows, and this is a lot of what I've researched and where the economists have done their studies, it shows that you completed a goal and that you had perseverance, and that you built towards something and achieved something. I think if I cite it correctly, the high school diploma versus the GED, for instance, what people actually earn with the GED isn't much different than had they not completed high school, because sometimes there's a stigma attached to that, and it serves as a signal in the job market. And we talk about these credentials also like they're commodities, right? We have very different kinds of brands, price points, approaches. So you can earn a degree in engineering or a degree in business, and probably going to get a very different experience at different institutions, and yet we treat them like a commodity. So yeah, we have to be careful about what's lost, and I would say it does look like the future is much more of a blending. And so much of the focus in terms of future visioning in higher ed suggests that, well, it's all online. It's all purely digital. And I made the case that that's a large portion of the market, that's a growing portion of the market, but I saw a survey that McKinsey did and released some data last week on millennials and people in the workforce. And it turned out a lot of the millennials' views were very similar to prior generations, and that they actually prefer, in terms of training, when they're in the workplace, as an example, hands-on training, face-to-face training, things that are blended, etc., over online and over mobile, right? We crave that human interaction, I think, in many cases, and so the future is some kind of blend, much like a lot of our life today, in other segments and in other ways that we engage with technology. It's more integrated, right? We still have banks. We do a lot of online banking. How do we get our groceries? Maybe it comes from Amazon. Maybe we go to the grocery store. We shop for specialty items. It's a blurring that's happening right now in this fourth machine age and this transition to much more of a digital sort of automation-infused global economy. So that's a long answer, but I hope that addressed the question as well. Yes, we have other questions here and then here.
If employers are driving the trend, I think you mentioned that employers are driving the trend, how are they engaged in the process of these new courses, new programs? Are they engaged in any meaningful way that we can identify that these certain institutions might offer the online education?
Yep, so how are employers engaged in some of these trends and online education? Unfortunately, there are some great examples where that's another trend with these new forms of credentials that are getting a lot of attention, is that they're endorsed or developed with specific employers, whether it's AT&T or another firm, often in high tech, but that's not happening nearly enough in terms of direct involvement of employers. And I think we need new structures in higher ed, or perhaps even just in some ways an openness to employer input, an input that's broadly applicable to an industry and not a proprietary technology, right? I mean, if employers had their way, higher ed would be sort of affordable, and it would be, laser focused on what their particular business needs, but then maybe you're trained or educated in a way that you can't work at another firm very easily, right? We need to do a lot more in terms of engaging employers, but some of these examples do include employer input and employer endorsement. Yet the other problem is that employers aren't really well organized with respect to these talent and HR and educational issues, right? Who might your employer liaison be at any firm? They might have a college recruiting person, they might have a VP of HR, but where in that person's portfolio does interacting with colleges and universities fit? Right? Employers themselves aren't really designed to interface with higher ed, and that's also, I think, where we'll need some new systems in the future. Yeah. Yes?
I
Okay, I appreciate your overview. I think you would find that our experience out here in Washington State is not in line with your opening idea about the growth of the baccalaureate, post-baccalaureate. We're a very high-tech, high-skills, high-export state, very much like the Boston area, plus a high-tech export economy,
Yeah.
which is also demanding water. All the growth in our economy, as recently surveyed by the Boston Consulting Group for the Business Roundtable, is all the sub-baccalaureate area. It's 6-month, 1-year credentials and 2-year degrees. Overwhelming where that growth is. And because of that industry demand here, that demand is moving down into the K-12 system. So what you see is that our K-12 system is rethinking, kind of district by district, the old business of shop, skills. Not everybody needs to go to a 4-year degree.
Yeah, almost like a German model.
Our experience out here is actually quite different from the data that you're presenting.
Yeah, no, that could very well be the case. I think I've seen that report. Due to our work in Seattle over the years, I remember looking at they may have changed the name, but the HECB forecasts, and the gap at the master's level's even bigger. Bachelor's and sub-baccalaureate's bigger in terms of scale, but like the growth rate, due to and it's a bit of an outlier, but the Amazons, et cetera, of the world, and the high-tech economy along the coast have really pulled up a lot of the demand for those sorts of roles. And the issue here seems to be, and if you look kind of summary level for the state, is a lot of that capacity is being imported, right? It's not being created locally in terms of degree attainment. It's people from California, it's people from Texas and New York or whatever that are getting hired and transported into the state. So
here's a data point
yeah.
for you. Microsoft has more Russian engineers in Seattle than in Moscow.
Wow, yeah. And well, I'm glad you made that point, because another trend I didn't really speak to is the growth of international students in the U.S. There's now 1 million international students, 10 to 15% annual growth, all-time record the last year or two. And with the changes in immigration policy, visa policy, et cetera, you're starting to see these really troubling leading indicators. Enrollment and surveys at business schools, what's happening with institutions in Canada and their applications surging by 50, 60%. A lot of the Indian students, the Indian and Chinese students have been often the case around the country for public 4-year schools in the Midwest or wherever. They have buoyed their enrollment by recruiting more international students. And now all of a sudden there's huge questions about, will those students want to study in the US, and can and should we retain them? And you look at successful startup companies, Fortune 50 companies, and high percentage of them that were founded by immigrants. So huge issues emerging in this global landscape in terms of you can import talent from anywhere. Often it's very expensive. But if the policy changes or your ability to kind of move people across borders changes, that is and will really impact this higher education market that we have. Yeah, thank you. There was a question over this way.
Yeah, just tagging onto that, I was trying to figure out the difference between the Washington Roundtable study and the Burning Glass. And Washington Roundtable was looking out to 2030. So is the Burning Glass, it seems like they're looking at current job openings rather than future job openings.
Yeah, the Burning Glass data is last year, snapshot, or real time you'd see pretty much the same percentages, although that's national. That will differ within Washington State and Washington State versus other places. I find it very hard, as much as we'd like to forecast out to 2030 or even 2022 or 2025. When you look historically at the Bureau of Labor Statistics forecasts, U.S. Department of Education forecasts, even forecasting that's done by Wall Street analysts, right, that have billions of dollars in the line, and did they see a financial collapse and a housing crisis? And it's just, that's why, as much as my book is titled The Future of University Credentials, you don't see predictions about what will the world look like in 2023, because it's very hard to forecast exactly. Yeah, the thing that I think is irrefutable, or at least I'd place a bet on, is it is more and more of a knowledge economy, and it's more advanced credentialing, more than it is, growth in other sectors of the workforce. Yes, there's a question back there.
Assistant guy on the right.
Okay. Yeah.
To piggyback on what you were just saying, has there been talk from the consumer perspective around giving credit for work experience? Because like you said, we talked about millennials and we talked about baby boomers, but there's this space in between where it wasn't necessary to go on at the time to get your master's degree, and yet now those people can't compete in the workforce without going back and getting that master's degree. Yet if they did, they would find themselves kind of taking steps backwards and also giving up time lost in the workplace. So is there a talk about how, and I know about maintaining quality and all that, and how you do it, also training kind of feeds into that as well, giving credit for people that go to trainings, go to things like this, go to conferences throughout their career, to give them credit much like licensing does with continuing education, because many times you have to retake your core classes, even as 5 to 10 years, you have to start all over. You can't jump right into your master's degree in the science field. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, okay. Credit for experience, and that is a big area. That's really the growth of competency-based education and more prior learning assessment that's being done for adult learners. So you see the stats cited a lot recently that there's 30 million Americans in the workforce that have some college credit but no degree, and the real boom of Western Governors University, which I think is around 90,000 students right now. They're more in that model. The Capella example that I shared, their FlexPath degree, their MBA, they maybe moved into other programs. That's much more of a competency-based and prior learning assessment-oriented model. What is really interesting is when you look to the employer side of the workforce, and some of these startup firms and technologies that are starting to work with HR units at big banks and major food and packaged goods companies and everything in between, hotel chains. These tech firms are starting to work with these progressive employers on, well, what kind of training have you done internally? What credentials and degrees and programs do people have externally? Let's look at your learning and development that you have, and let's find a way to assess it and kind of give it a score or put it in a database that relates more, regardless of how it was acquired, through experience, through learning, outside, inside. We can have a view into what people's competencies are. What are the competencies of my organization as an employer? What are the skills that people have? And you can kind of build that up in a data-based way, and then you can start to maybe work with an outside provider that will assess and award a degree for it. I think that's some of the future that we're moving toward. I think it's going to happen very slowly, but that will be a challenge to traditional higher ed, and it will be an opportunity for some institutions that focus more on the assessment rather than always being the one that delivers the content. Thank you. There's a question over here.
Yeah,
questions, comments?
My question is about hybrid online education and about Heritage University. As a small university, our focus is always on expansion and recruitment. So what experiences, structures, and or tools would you suggest or are available out there that will not cost us financially a lot, that will help us get into that field and offer larger potential student bodies hybrid online experiences here at Heritage University?
Yeah, so the question is tools and options to create online hybrid experiences that will grow enrollment but not cost a lot of money and have financial risk. That's one of the shifts in the environment, in the ecosystem, is the emergence of these enablement or program management providers that enter into revenue sharing arrangements where they take on the risk. Now they have to believe that your institution sort of has a high quality program or a high quality brand in a certain zone that's worth them taking on the risk and going out and marketing, and that they can get students into it. But it's a turnkey kind of model where they say, we as a technology firm will put the capital up, maybe it costs $1 million or $2 million to start an online degree, and then they recruit the students, and then you share the revenue and the success, or in the institution's case, not as much the failure. That's more of a fully outsourced way to do it. Certainly there's best practices you can look at, and if you already have Blackboard or Instructure or some other kind of online learning system, hiring an individual. I mean, when you look back at the history of the last 10, 15 years of distance ed, a lot of it was achieved by public and private nonprofit institutions Eastern Oregon University, and many institutions out west here in more rural states, where they did it without a lot of resources or not a lot of heavy marketing. Because if you do have a student population that's interested in your institution, or we have a brand in a region, you know, they're fundamentally thinking first about their educational options, and your institution is in the mix, and ideally then they discover that you have an online program or an online choice that they can engage in versus having to enroll with Capella or UMass Online or someone else. Of all the online enrollment, fully online study in the US, I think it's 3.5 or 4 million students. So it's a big number, and it's billions and billions of revenue for institutions. Of all of those students, about 70%, I believe, enroll within a 100-mile radius of their institution. So even though I have, if I wanted to earn, do a bachelor's degree completion program, I probably have 1,500 online choices right now. If I was sitting right out here, might it be Heritage University, might it be Western Governors or somewhere else, even though I had 1,500 choices, the vast majority of people enroll with a more local to them institution. If you're doing it in a hybrid way or even a fully online way, they can meet their students. The brand of that institution is well known among employers. There's really some interesting regional effects in terms of how the online market works. Yeah. Let's go back here.
So
yeah.
I'm a chair of the Educational Administration Program here at Heritage, and in fact over the last 3 years we've almost tripled the size of our program because we use a blended synchronous online on-ground model, which allows us to have candidates from all over the state primarily deliver synchronous online with some asynchronous components, and then they gather for an all-day Saturday seminar. And it's been very successful for us. We find it incredibly engaging, and like I said, we've tripled our program in 3 years.
Excellent. Yeah, great case study and example of that. The people's preference for delivery mode, right? We've been talking about it. We recognize that a lot of the innovation in quote-unquote credentialing is new modes to earn a traditional credential more than it is today a new credential. That online and hybrid and face-to-face market is a bit of a bell curve. Varies a little bit by age and by how much people are working, etc. But generally overall, if you survey a consumer, a prospective student, and you ask what is your preferred delivery mode that you'd like to pursue education, whether it's a master's in ed, undergraduate degree completion, or a degree in engineering or nursing, you'll get a little variation. But if you survey people and say, how do you prefer to study? You'll find that 60% are in the middle and want some kind of blending. And you'll have about 20% on either end. There's 20% of the market, which is almost fully mature, that wants only an online vehicle. They don't want to set foot in classroom. They don't have to. Maybe they're busy, they're traveling for work, maybe they have small children at home. For whatever reason, they love online. They could be autodidacts, and they're just going to study online. Then you have another 20% at the other end of the bell curve that don't want to touch online. They need the human interaction, they need to be face-to-face, they need to be in a classroom. And one of the problems is that most institutions are only addressing either end. They're saying, well, we're going to have a big online strategy or partner with someone, and we're going to deliver these programs fully at a distance, and yes, that's a strong market. Or we're going to stay wedded to only face-to-face. And then in between, that 60%, there's many people that want a little online, a lot of face-to-face, or a lot of whatever the other example would be, right? It's you substitute out those different parts of the mix. And there's not even a clear definition on blended or hybrid, but you open up the options, and as I referenced earlier, there are some studies that suggest that blended delivery, because you can get, if it's done right, the best of both worlds, you have the best outcomes.
And I would just add that we're beginning the investigation to try to transform it into a more competency-based model, not such a time-bound model.
Yeah, and competency-based, I like to argue, it is not purely about recognizing adults' work experience and integrating that into kind of direct assessment and placing out and rapidly going through programs. It's a broader notion of, and whether it's liberal arts skills or scientific and technical skills, let's align our courses with competencies and clearer outcomes, which has been the push in education for a long time. That's what the market is demanding, and once that happens, you'll see a lot more interchangeability because we can measure and demonstrate and point to, well, here's a competency versus it's all wrapped up, in a credential in a 4-year program or a 2-year program that we can't explain. Yeah, a lot of other questions, comments, yes. We'll go over here. Hope we don't miss anyone.
Yeah, I am very curious about, as we're looking at universities and credentialing, if you have done any data collection within tribal communities. We have pockets within our society that have, access to education is a challenge for some, and we're here in the Yakima Valley on the Yakima Reservation. But I was curious to see if you had, as you were doing your research, looked at tribal colleges or universities that serve primarily American Indian populations, and did you collect any data, and what did that look like? Or as we were looking at, the landscape of education and credentialing?
Yeah, it's a question about tribal colleges and that population. No, unfortunately, I haven't specialized or even come across anything in that area at all in terms of I don't know if there's an association or sort of a movement to sort of exchange practices or information or trends among certain types of colleges in that area, but I haven't come across anything on my own.
Okay.
Yeah. I would imagine, but because I'm assuming more rural, that perhaps there's more of a heritage of distance education, and that it could be, a useful vehicle. Yet, when you look at, and I don't know the statistics, but as you kind of change the demographics and backgrounds, and also the levels of study, you do see different effects and problems with online education. Like one of the things that didn't quite work out was Udacity's experiment, if you will, at San Jose State, right? People that were more first generation, and having a highly online course that would just sort of broadcast out them, was not a solution for that particular population, right? It was kind of an attempt to say, well, technology is going to magically increase access, but the experiment didn't work, because where you do find online education having more traction, and I should note, where it is more accepted among employers is the graduate level, because often the truth or the assumption is that someone might have had a more traditional bachelor's degree experience where they quote unquote grew up or went away to school and had that acculturation and gone through their program, and then if you're doing some professional learning to polish up your skills or advance your knowledge, you do that online, you get a master's, it's now commonplace. But if you have a fully online bachelor's degree, sometimes that's perceived a little bit differently in terms of, well, it's great, we value that you were in the workforce, maybe we value that you did it part-time and you can juggle multiple things, but if it's from the University of Phoenix or somewhere, it's seen as a lesser credential. I'm actually doing a survey on that now, but unfortunately it doesn't address tribal or regional issues.
I was
Yes.
intrigued by one of the things that was at the bottom of one of your slides.
Yeah.
It mentioned that 75% of freshmen
Oh, I forgot to mention that,
plan
yes.
to earn an advanced degree. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that. And I'm also curious, another thing we haven't addressed at all today is student debt load and how that's impacting those freshmen, those bachelor's level students, and they're thinking about graduate education.
Yep, yeah, so I forgot to make that point that was embedded in one of the slides, which was, I think, that 75% of entering freshmen. National giant sample, that's the UCLA CIRP, CIRP study. That's up over prior years. It actually hasn't changed too much over the decades. It used to be at maybe 60%, 65% thereabouts. But when you ask people, when you ask freshmen entering and showing up on US college campuses of all types, what degree do you intend to earn as your highest level degree? Fully 3/4, and we know that only maybe 20% of people enroll in a bachelor's program get to a graduate degree. 3/4 say that they are looking to get a graduate degree. So that's been trending up. Sorry, the second part of your question?
Well, actually, it was about student debt loads, but
Student debt loads.
I'm curious though more. You said that actually hasn't changed too much.
Well, it's moved more slowly than when I showed, for instance, the millennials, and the fact that it's doubled the percentage that are earning a master's by age 30 in the last 15 years or so. the percentage that intends or hopes to earn a master's degree has moved more, a percentage point or so a year. It's kind of a steady uptrend, but it's much longer scale, if that makes sense. Debt load is critical. Unfortunately, I'm not a higher ed finance expert in the same way that I know there are so many of my peers that could speak in depth to debt levels, et cetera. At the graduate level, at least, which is an outsized portion of the total outstanding debt, much higher repayment rates, lower default rates. A lot of the averages that you see are dragged up by people, and of course the law market in many cases has collapsed, where they earn a very expensive JD or MD. The MDs are paying it back, some of the JDs aren't, but in general there's very small loan default rates. And then certainly with undergraduate education, high level of issues, high percentage incidence of delinquencies and loans that aren't in repayment, et cetera. I believe, at least if we believe some of the traditional measures and the way that institutions are measured and things are published in the cohort default studies and the college scorecard, et cetera, that compared to a few years ago when the economy was rougher and it was still more recovering, not to say that it's not different regionally, things have gotten a lot healthier. But my argument generally would be, and I think many colleges should be much lower priced, and we've done a lot of interesting ROI studies, that the return is still there. But the problem I showed is that in the college wage premium, at many employers, and especially in kind of scientific and technical and knowledge roles and industries, the bachelor's degree is now the baseline for much of their hiring and much of their workforce. It's 50, 60, 70% of their hires. That bachelor's degree, even though a third of the US population holds one, and that means we have a vast majority that does not, that bachelor's degree sometimes is just getting your foot in the door. It is no longer the thing that advances you as it did, World War II, the 1970s, pick an era, where this was the ticket to the middle class. And in many ways, unfortunately, it is now more of a baseline, and then it becomes the master's or something else that differentiates you. So huge issues there that are very complicated. And, hopefully throughout the afternoon we can explore some of that more. How are we doing on time?
Probably need to take a break. I see food starting to come in. I thought perhaps a kind of restructuring of our agenda a little bit was to have tabletop discussions over lunch. And then we can brief out just towards the end of the lunch period and then kind of get back on the pacing, but to keep the dialogue going. And I'm going to plant with a possible question if it's relevant to you. I was just looking at, I have to speak on behalf of my faculty senate, who is going through the exercise of re-engineering our gen ed program, and they keep returning to the mission of our university, which is to create responsible citizens who will live enlightened and productive lives. Are we focusing entirely on productive lives and not citizenship and enlightenment? And is that part of the university experience? I don't know any longer. It's becoming a question mark.
Yeah. Is that the Wisconsin ideal, is it called?
Yeah, I think it is.
I think it's
yeah, that worked pretty well, didn't it there? And then the other question that my faculty ask a lot about accelerated degrees and certificate is part of the process of the BA or the BS, the time spent, the interaction with a diverse learning group. And if we begin to package these things in accelerated ways, the technique is there. I'm thinking that a lot, and this is something you might, if you got a smartphone and you're not familiar with the term, I wasn't until about a year ago, with the T employee, the vertical axis being a skill, an engineering skill, an accounting skill, but the horizontal being multiculturalism, enlightenment, ability to work across the variety of people. And are we focusing on this exclusively, or is my faculty a little too worried about the horizontal axis? And that's going to be an interesting question that I think will come up in the next hour as well. So a break for about 10 minutes to do whatever it is. Unless there's one more question of Sean.
Yeah, I'll be around, excited to
okay,
talk to all of you and
continue
to interact.
Let's take, yes ma'am.
I just want to say, this was awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Still be out of writing the book at 3. Yeah, will you really?
People have the book, absolutely. We're going to give you a discount code if you want to buy it. Yeah.
If you don't have the book, leave at 2:30, you'll embarrass yourself. No, I'm kidding. So let's take a break.
Thanks.
Men's and ladies' room, both to the right and to the left. And well done. Well done. No, it's good. That's dialogue.